today, Nat and Sam, for the session on leading yourself and teams in a time of crisis. Nat and Sam, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Brett. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Natalia. I'm coming from MG HR, and so happy to be able to share here on this webinar. So, I'm going to share about how the COVID really changed the world, especially for us as a leader right now. So the C letter is become so uh, heard in very often recently. Yes, as this is a COVID-19, it changed the whole world life. I believe, and these are truly a situation where we cannot predict in the current situation. In so many ways, the disruptions caused by the coronavirus itself is inevitable. There is uncertainty, lacking of clear path, threatening our sense of control, and also make us afraid and anxious. So this is very tough for all of us for the to facing the COVID-19 situation. Many of us has been impacted in some way by the virus, and we probably we are still stay healthy. We are not ill, but some of our people in the community is not as good as we are. But whether we are ill or not, whether we are healthy or not, we have to change our routines, cancel our trips, stay at home, cannot go anywhere, and we are bombarded by the media that we don't know which one we can trust. So the situation is very beyond my imagination. I believe I just watched my recently movie Train to Busan, which I believe that is a very uh, I believe that I only see it on the movie, but right now it's something that's so real that happened to our life. So what I was worried about is the emotional contagion itself is spreading even faster than the virus. At a time like this, what we do want to hear from our leaders actually, we would like them to be as calm as possible, to reassure us, to have a compassion, to have hope, to give us guidance, and to have the clarity of what the future pathways. But how if we are as the leader itself? How if you are as a leader? What if people looking at you? So basically, the first person you have to lead for yourself is yourself before we can lead others. So in this session, Sam and I will share about how we can lead ourselves and how we can by the end of the time we can lead our leaders as effective as possible. As a human nature, actually, self-leadership is a skill that everybody has already. But the question is, will it be an effective already, especially in the time of crisis like this? So this is what we are going to share, especially about how we lead ourselves and how we are going to manage our team. Especially my part, I will share about how we are going to lead ourselves. So leading yourself in a time of crisis, like I shared before, this is a skill that everybody already have in a way, but you just need to make sure that we are doing it to lead ourselves effectively in this time of crisis, so it become uh, effective to lead our team as well. The first item that I would like to share is about self-care. As simple as the analogy will be, this kind of situation in the crisis situation is something like when you are on the turbulence on the airlines. The stewardess will always remind you to keep on your mask, the oxygen mask first for yourself. Then after that, you can put your oxygen mask to your team, your kids. So, in other words, if you are going to lead others through a time of stress, through a time of fears, uncertainty, it is essential for us to manage your own experience first, and then after that, you can manage the best as you can for your team. You can be there for your team. Your team member will take cues if you are seen as anxious, worries. They will also share the response. They also feel the response. They also feel worry as well. So it will likely make them more stressful as well. So in terms of that, we would like to have them be more calm and we can help them. In that case, then we need to go to take care of ourselves first. There's a lot going on and it's very heavy, but leaders need to look after themselves. This means that as simple as taking care of yourself by taking good sleep, exercise, spend time with your family, whatever activity that fills the cup. Don't let your cup become empty, because when it's empty, then you run out your energy. You cannot lead your team again. Only then you can become the example for your team. You can work with your team from time to time. So if you see the picture is some moms who is doing cooking with a daughter. So what do I do for my self-care in this kind of day? Actually, I love to cook, but as an excuse, probably with the 8 to 5 working times at the office, make me difficult to always cook for my family. So this time I do more cooking with my daughter. I do more cooking with my family, for my family. In a way, I also have 9 years daughter who like to do experiments in the kitchen. So we spend time together. So we do something, we prepare something, and then we enjoy it. So those kind of activities recharge my energy. Actually, after that, I can put myself on more focus on the job itself. Actually, it can be vary from one to another. Probably for someone who already cook from time to time. I have been enough with the cooking. I always cook every day. So no, I don't want to do cooking as my self-care. I prefer to take sleep. I prefer to play games probably, or I prefer to read books. So basically, it can be vary from people to people, from one to another. But the most important thing is that you need to recognize where do you get your energy from, or how you can recharge your energy, or you recognize whether you already run out of your energy or not. So that is the most important things that we need to be aware of in this kind of situation as leader. It is very important now, even you need to take a double down on the taking care of yourself, not in a selfish way, but so you are able to be there for your team and also for your family. That's the point on the self-care part. And then the next part will be on the self-management. I do believe that I do also believe that a lot of people before the crisis, they always imagine that, oh gosh, I feel that it will be looks like heaven if I can work at home. So I can be at home, taking care of my family while I'll also do my job. It could be a very productive one. That's something like an dream work that we want to apply. But I think you can share me that after you've been through on the almost 1 month, if I may say, or work from home in Indonesia, how do you feel? Working at home with kids around you, with hosting that you need to settle, I think that's nightmare for me itself. So yes, so this crisis changed us a lot, changed our routine, changed our working style. So we need to manage ourselves as well in a different way to stay accountable, to do our job, to ensuring that we done our job in a appropriate time and put our resources in an effectively manner. So I'm sure I'm not alone in finding this tricky now, but trying to be more productive from home is quite challenging. In this situation, I try to develop a new routine for myself. New routine means we still try to get up early in the morning, and then try to develop the way that as if I'm going to the office, dress up like go to the office. So it feels like the new routine need to be settled down for each of us. Once you can follow your work routine, you stay productive with your work. However, working from home needs very complete employee dedication, I believe. It needs our dedication. This includes isolation from all of the non-essential components during the work hour. I also share my kids that okay guys, during this hour, during this time, I will going to have a lot of meetings. I'm going to do a lot of papers in my computer, so you cannot disturb me. So this kind of things also need to share with the family members so they are aware of it and they won't disturb you, even or only when it is necessary. So that's the only way that we manage our new routine right now when we are doing work from home. What I try to do as well is I try to build a certain task per day that I need to achieve, that I need to complete by this day. So try to break it down as much as possible, and then I push myself to make the job done. So it helps us to stay focused on what the item that we need to focus on, and it also helped my team to manage our job done as well. So yeah, that's very a different way to work on it. So basically, the self-management is you need to find your new routine, get rid of all of distraction, and manage this. And then the last thing is you need to stay connected with your team member to maintain that your job is done on the proper time. So that's the second part on how you are doing your self-leadership. On the third part will be on more on the self-growth. Some of the people may say, what self-growth during this kind of COVID-19 when everything's become so crisis? How come? Absolutely no way. There is no chance to do this. So first respond to the COVID-19 itself. One, you may say that, okay, we can love it, but I don't think no one will love the situation basically. Second, we can say that we hate it, but so what it is. If you hate it, then there is nothing we can do on this. Final one, the last one is, yes, we can be realistic. Option to emerge or to the COVID-19 crisis as something that we can turn into a positive experience, at least to some degree. I believe that this is very hard for us, especially for leader, because we are having so many issues that we need to face during this kind of situation. But I think that I do believe that this crisis will teach us something. The first thing that we can learn is the emotion itself. I myself learned that the emotional growth for this during the COVID-19 crisis are the most important thing that I have learned, because I've been doing, or I've been past experience the situation that I never can imagine before. This is the first time that I learn about my emotion. I learn about how I feel sad, how I feel worry, how I feel sorry for the situation, how I feel helplessness, hopelessness, frustration, anger, and a lot of things. So this kind of emotion, this kind of situation teach me on how for me to recognize my emotion situation. And again, this is something that beside COVID-19, probably it won't be any other situation that can help us to understand more on this. And then in terms of the self-growth itself, in terms of on the skill side, I always heard that people saying that I haven't got time. I think it's a common excuse by having saying that I don't have time. I don't have time to do anything that I want to do. I don't have time to read my book. So I think this is also a good time for us to spend our time more wisely in terms of focusing on learning new skill, focusing on the item that you want to learn. Probably you can have a list of my new project book. So you can list down all of the books that you want to read there, and then probably you can also share your prepare yourself and my new project. One of my new project for me is doing more webinar, doing more sharing, doing more sharing to to the society. So it helps me as well to learn on a new things. So basically, this COVID-19, yes, this is worst situation, but we can do something on it. We can learn something for it, and we can force ourselves to learn something. So we are ready to facing the new era after the COVID, because after the COVID, things will be totally different, and we need to be prepared of it. Uh, yeah, that's how I see on how we need to focus on our self growth in terms of the self leadership itself. Again, as a leader, we need to take this mindset, and then we need to share it as well to our team member, because yes, like I said before, after this, after the COVID-19, the new era of working will become, and we need to be ready, and then we need to taking care of everything, ourselves, and then try to manage the work, and then try to grow our skill, learn our new skill. So this three area will help us to focus on what we are going to do next. Tough time, never less, but tough people do. Yes, by having and taking care of ourselves, by doing the management, and also by focusing on what we can learn in this new era, we will be a tough people, and we will survive from this COVID-19 things. So I think that's all from my part for the self leadership, Sam. So hopefully it can help us to manage ourselves. So I hand over to you, Sam, to share your part.
Okay, thanks, Nat. Thank you
Thanks, Sam.
so much. Right, so I think Ned brought up a lot of interesting pointers, right, in terms of self-leadership. So maybe before I move on, right, I think what we can do, understand that the connectivity may not be great for everyone. So let me just make a conscious effort to slow down a little bit. And maybe at this point, let's take a quick pause. And can I just poll the audience quickly, right? Do you mind just typing out maybe one key takeaway that you have from that session first? And also all of us can learn maybe something interesting or another interesting perspective that you may have. Let's take about a minute or so while I recap what my key learning is from the next session as well. Shall we? Okay, so while you guys are typing it out, please keep the feedback coming. I think for me, what really went well or resonated with me from net sharing, I think a lot of parts. I think one of the first part is then the self-care aspect. I think in this current situation, a lot of fear involved, especially as a leader, right? We have to put up a brave front of sword to make sure that we give confidence to our employees. And that's where I think from mental and physical point of view, we have to take good care of ourselves. Failing which we can't actually assure our team members that, they should go in a specific direction. And of course, I think, like Ned rightly pointed out, now is a huge change for most of us. And then when things get better, whether it's in 12 months' time, 6 months, 18 months' time, the new norm may no longer be what we see in the past, right? And that's where the self management part, the part where we readjust what we have to do and the new lifestyle itself. I think that's really important as well. Something for us to all think about that, hey, it's no longer about staying where we're comfortable, but we need to actually move on to something that is new, something that we can adapt. And if we are able to adapt, if we are able to change our mindset, I think that's where both ourselves as leaders, our teams, and the organization can then emerge a lot stronger from the situation itself. And of course, I've been seeing some nice feedback here. So some mention like Rajesh, discipline and best time to learn new skill. Yes, precisely. We have a lot of downtime now. Great time to learn something new. Let's see. Terrence mentioned self-growth. Yes, I mean, this is a time to, like Ned mentioned, we should reflect upon ourselves to think what are we doing well, what perhaps we can work on, since we have a bit of a slower pace of sort at this moment. All right, so let's keep the comment going. I think that's a good chance for us to reflect, for us to learn from one another. But let me just move on in the essence of time as well. Now that Ned has mentioned about the self-leadership aspect, right? I would like to now focus a lot more in terms of now you have taken care of yourself. How can we then, as leaders, lead our teams both internally and externally? We all know that currently we are facing a situation where COVID, is a pain in the ass, right? Everyone is being affected by it. We can't go out and this and that. But let's use this chance to see how can we use COVID to tackle COVID. Okay, what do I mean by that? Let me just explain a little bit further. Okay, first, the first in terms of COVID, the first letter C, all right, community. What do I mean by community? So in times of crisis like this, what's important is that, hey, we can no longer think of just working in silo. We can no longer just think of, hey, in my department, it's just myself or my team, and I'm going to draw a fine line with finance, with marketing, with operations or sales, for example, or even working alone as an organization and look at everyone else as competition, for example. Instead, how do we then start shifting our mindset a little bit? How do we start thinking that, hey, it's no longer about competition now. It's now high time, to come together as a community to collaborate. I think that's really the gist of the first point. There's a community. How can we have that mindset shift in terms of coming together to support one another? So the first point when it comes to internal collaboration or building internal communities, what we are looking for essentially, right, is to create a strong support network. What do I mean? In times of uncertainty, employees are unfamiliar with a lot of things. Employees are worried about, what's next. Employees are worried about, hey, am I facing this alone, for instance? And very often, they may not have anyone to speak with. They may not know where can they go to, right? So that's where as a leader, I think we want to create that sort of assurance, the assurance that, hey, you're not walking alone. I mean, I'm not a Liverpool fan, but okay, you never walk alone in that sense, but you have a support network, right? Where you come together and leaders to provide that infrastructure for the team members, for the team to fall back on. So for example, you know, you have been seeing a lot of people online probably using the likes of Zoom or Microsoft Teams, whatever it is, to do things like virtual, what do you call that, virtual drinking session, virtual lunches, virtual dinner, virtual workouts, for example. Beyond the fun and engaging part of it, what's more important, right, is actually the part where they're creating a support network, right? They're trying to let you know that, hey, we're in this together. We may be separated, but still connected in a way, right? And that's where it becomes a bit more assuring for employees who are still uncertain about what's happening, who are alone at home, or maybe facing some kind of personal challenges during this process itself. So having that strong support network is really important, and that's the first thing I would say from a community perspective that leaders have to think about. And then from an external perspective, right, leaders also have to think about how can you create opportunities to collaborate across the different teams and industries. So for instance, this example you see here, right, Singapore Airlines. We all know the travel industry, in particular aviation, is affected really badly. And based on what I understand, I think the Singapore Airlines side, on average, the employees are taking at least a 70% hit in terms of pay and salary itself on average. So what happened was Singapore Airlines, right, instead of just putting the air stewardess, air stewards, redundant in a sense, what they did was to work and collaborate with the likes of a hospital like Changi General Hospital in Singapore. They worked with the the train company Singapore MRT itself to transform the stewardess and stewards into what we call the care ambassadors. So think about this. If the Singapore Airlines was just thinking about, hey, how can I redeploy them within a company itself? Probably they get nothing, right? They probably have no idea what can I do with them, and back to square one is just redundancy, is just taking no paid leave, for instance. But then if you're able to think of the community as something bigger than just your industry, than your company itself, hey, that's where the opportunities actually happen. Like for this case, Singapore Airlines partner with, like I said, Changi General Hospital, where they utilize the strengths of the stewardess, the stewards, where it's about smile, it's about service level, it's about care, to deploy them as what they call care ambassadors to show care to patients who are facing challenges at this moment. So I thought that was really beautifully done because they're looking at opportunities outside and collaborating using the concept of community itself. And that's where, you create a lot of magic, beyond just looking at what's the limited resource that you have on hand alone, right? So that's the first letter C, community. Let's move on. Next, O stands for openness. In times of crisis, what's really important as a leader, right, especially in crisis, is really being transparent and open about the situation. I mean, everyone knows that the situation is bad now. I mean, there's no need to mask it to tell everyone, oh, it's actually okay and stuff like that. We all know it's typically not okay. But being open with the situation to let others know, your team members, your organization knows what's not okay, what's not going well, and what are we working on to make things better. I think that's really important. Rather than giving a false impression, a fake situation itself, you want to add value and assurance by being open itself. So let me share two case studies or stories that I think is quite interesting in this situation. Right, the first one is this. So you're probably familiar with Starbucks, right? I think a lot of us, are customers of Starbucks. We need a cup every single day, but probably now not so much. We're all at home most of the time. Um, the current CEO, so Howard Schultz, right? He was the one who started Starbucks in '87, where I was born actually, and he kind of scaled up Starbucks very successfully. In 13 years by year 2000, where they had, I believe, 3,500 stores before he stepped down as a CEO and took over as the chairman itself. So what happened was, even though he built out a pretty successful momentum, when the new management took over the next 6 years, from 2000 to 2006, things went, array. There was a huge crisis because the focus of leadership shifted. It was no longer about the quality of the coffee. It wasn't about the experience. It was just about expanding the stores, right? So with that, actually what happens over the next 6 years, the number of stores globally from 3,500 actually expanded to over 12,000 outlets. So it sounds on paper like it's pretty successful, but they were facing a lot of crisis because everything became more automated. They lacked human touch. The quality of coffee went down, and that's where Howard Schultz felt that, hey, it's time for me to come back. He changed the management. He came back in 2006, and the very first thing he said or did was to gather all his employees and apologize. Even though he wasn't the one kind of directly responsible for this kind of downfall in that crisis over the next 6 years itself, he recognized that, he let the eyes off the ball in a sense, and he felt responsible, that he should be open to explain what was the situation, why were things not going as well as it seems, and taking responsibility for that by apologizing first. And with that, what happened was he gained the trust and respect of all the employees, or most of them at least, which then helped him to turn things around over the next couple of years to the current Starbucks we are seeing once again today. So I thought this is a very interesting story where he shared about how he was very open about things, how he was trying to apologize and be vulnerable in some sense to ensure that there's assurance, there's trust and respect built during this process itself. So that's the first story. The next one is also very interesting. Some of you might have seen this story on INC itself, or if you have time, can add me on LinkedIn, Sam Neill. I shared this article previously as well. Happy to share the article again if you link me up. So what happened was this guy by the name of Dan Price, he's actually a CEO of this company called Gravity, which is they manage some credit card process payments in that sense. His company, like most companies now, they're all facing a challenge that the business is not doing as well. Revenue is hit really badly, top line, bottom line, everything. And then he was left with two options supposedly. Option one, lay off 20% of the employees. Option two, go bankrupt, right? So after pondering for a long time, thinking through this whole situation, he decided that there must be a third option. I'm not going to stop at just either laying people off or going bankrupt. There must be a win-win situation. So guess what he did? It was really interesting. What he did was then he became very open and he got his employees together. He shared with them the current situation that, hey, the company's revenue has been hit by this amount. We can either lay off 20%, we can go bankrupt. Or what he did was amazing. He said, or we can voluntarily decide on the amount of salary that we want to voluntarily give up during this crisis itself so that we can tide through this whole crisis together. I thought that was really amazing. So what he did was it was an anonymous exercise, right? Where each employee would then indicate anonymously behind the scenes what is the amount that they are willing to give up. So those who are earning more, who can afford in that sense, they can probably give up a bigger percentage. For those who can't afford, who have perhaps more people in the family, more expenses to manage, for instance, they can choose to give a little bit lesser. There's no penalty, there's no public shaming, whatever. And because of that, they were able to, at least for now, tide through this crisis. No, I thought that was really interesting. You know, in most cases, you might think that why would employees sacrifice in any way? I mean, I wouldn't from a company that I don't believe in, right? But for the very fact that Dan was so open, Dan was so giving, Dan was so trusting in some sense, it created trust and he was reciprocated with trust from the employees themselves. And that's where the magic happens. And of course, I think just want to emphasize a further point, a backstory for this is that interestingly, Dan Price was also on another article previously where he voluntarily deducted his salary to take a pay cut. And what he did was to ensure that all his employees have at least a minimum salary of 70,000 US dollars a year. So why am I bringing out this example is because think of it, in times of crisis, people might, just think of themselves, they might go selfish, for instance. But why do employees even bother about a company? Why do they bother about, it surviving, everyone else surviving? It's because in peacetime, right? What kind of things have you done for them? What kind of message were you sending to them? Did you show that you care? Did you show that you have an interest at heart? Or were you just thinking of, bottom line, top line, and just about the company's welfare without caring about employees? And that's where during crisis itself, it makes a lot of difference, I must say. So these two examples I thought are pretty interesting in terms of how leaders open up themselves and got very good response that helped them tide through crisis or at least do better during the crisis itself. All right. So feel free, I'm trying to go as slow as I can, during which if you have any questions, feel free to type it in the chat box itself. If I can answer along the way, I'll try to answer along the way. If not, happy to take the questions with Nat at the end of the session. All right? All right, let's move on. Okay, V actually stands for something we are all very familiar with, which we are doing now, video conferencing, right? So we all know that, I think Brad was sharing previously in the previous webinar with Dan, saying that, the current crisis, it might take like what, 12 to 18 months easily for the recovery. And the recovery pattern will most likely not be a standard U shape, where it's just, a rebound and things get better, but rather it could be potentially a Y shape, a Y shaped recovery, which means some of the sectors could recover faster, some might then take longer. And then we talk about after 18 months, 12 months, we're back to normal. So the question for us to all think about is this. What exactly is normal, right? Is normal back to where we were pre-COVID? Or is normal what we are seeing now? Or is normal an iteration of what we are having now plus what we had previously plus maybe something new that's coming up after the situation? I don't have a magic ball, but I can tell you that it's probably not going to be exactly the same as what we saw pre-COVID. And one thing for sure that's going to be a, a standard item that we'll see perpetually would then be the online virtual communication, the video conferencing, for instance. And this is probably a new normal that we're expecting. And with that new normal in mind, I thought what's really important for all of us to consider and for us to think about before things get any better in that sense, before we pump in more resources to make things happen, to enhance what we have at this moment, is to think of what is the opportunity, what are the threats, right? Opportunity wise, I think I shared some examples previously, using the likes of, Zoom or whichever online platform to do engagement, right? You can have, the regular meetings, live chats like this, conferences. You can even have virtual workouts, virtual Zumba, whatever you call it. You can have, like a happy hour kind of thing virtually. You can have things like House Party, the apps like House Party playing games. So there are many things you can do, beyond that official work aspect to engage employees, to connect, like I said, be connected while being separated, to let them feel that, hey, it's not all about hardcore work, but also we care about your well-being. We care about how you feel. We want you to still stay connected and engaged with the company and the team itself. So these are some opportunities that I feel are really important for us to consider during such crisis. But then, of course, with every opportunity itself comes with certain threat that we should be mindful of and not assume that everything is going to be peaceful, going to go smoothly all the time. For example, just like some of you might have been facing some connectivity issue, like I mentioned, ensuring that we beef up the infrastructure right? Both from the back-end point of view, from the software, hardware point of view, is something one think about, whether you're HR or the management team itself. Security is probably also one big aspect that we have to think about, right? I think if you have read the news, heard about Zoom previously, they were kind of slammed pretty badly for a period of time, saying that they were hacked. There were people going to certain group chats and sharing obscene stuff. 500,000 users password was sold in the dark web or something like that. So the security part has become even more important now that we are so reliant, so reliant on technology and the virtual connection that we're doing now. So these are some things I hope that we can think about from a video conferencing or online tools point of view, right? Technology and communication coming together provides a lot of opportunities, but at the same time, we have to be mindful of what are some potential downside that we want to mitigate to protect ourselves so that business can go as usual or do even better with the resources that we have in the new norm that we spoke about. All right. Interest. All right. So I love this quote. I mean, I saw this from Richard Branson. So he said, take care of your employees and they'll take care of your business. It's as simple as that. Essentially, there's also another saying that I've been sharing quite a fair bit recently, which is um, people only care about what you say when they know that you care, right? People only care about what you say after after they know that you care about them. And this was a realization that I had during a recent coaching session, where I was chatting with this guy from Seattle, right? Just helping him to clarify some of his thoughts because he's a little bit lost in his career currently. So after the session itself, he reached out and he said to me, "Hey Sam, this was the best Zoom session I had by far over the past few months." And I asked him, "What do you mean? Was it the content or whatever?" He said this. He said it wasn't just about the content. I mean, the content was good, but what he really loved was that he felt I cared about him. I was listening to him. I was trying to empathize with his needs, his challenges, rather than just jumping straight away and say, "Hey, you should do this, you should do that." Like typical leaders, where we have experiences, we have certain expertise that we can share advice and knowledge. But let's hold our horses a little while, right? Sometimes I think it's very important to then take interest in the other party by listening first. Having that active listening to understand, hey, where are they coming from? What are some things they're facing? What are some potential opportunities we can work on with them? And then jump in with a more holistic solution. That shows you're interested, that shows that you care, and that's where they respect you and a lot of good things happen from there. So I like itself, which is very interesting, from a company called Singtel, Singapore Telecommunications in Singapore. Yep.
When I was told I was COVID positive, it came as a shock because I only had fever and I didn't have any other symptoms. First thing that came to mind were the friends and the colleagues that I met up with. I was also concerned that if it affected me, it could also affect them. The doctor said that they have to put me through ICU and they would need to sedate and intubate me. I almost freaked out because I had heard of many people who were connected to life support machine. They actually never come out of it. There was another doctor who then explained to me that it was to provide basically oxygen and to try to clear my lungs. And then I realized that probably could be the only way to cure me.
Can I just clarify on this particular case? When I got the call, the first thing that came to my head was he fine? And my second concern is that are the people around him okay or not? The safety and the health of our staff. That was our priority. Next thing, we cleaned up the office. That was so important. We actually did a disinfection at 12 midnight.
Okay, I guess the video is a little bit slow, but it's okay. We can send a video to you if you're interested. So let me just kind of share a little bit about what the video is all about, right? So the video happened in Singapore, in this company called Singapore Telecommunications, Singtel in short. Is the largest telecommunications company that is a client of mine that I'm working with. So what happened was recently, I think it was just about a month back, one of the employees unfortunately contracted COVID-19. So as soon as they found out, HR found out that this employee got this COVID-19 virus itself, what they did was to immediately actually close the office itself. They told everyone to evacuate, and even though some employees were trying to rush back, right, to get the laptops, they made sure that security didn't allow that to happen. They immediately mobilized a cleaning company to disinfect everything, the whole floor itself, to make sure everyone is safe, got everyone tested in a sense. And the first priority that they had, what they did, not only did they say, but they showed, right, that they cared about the well-being of employees first. That was the very first thing. It wasn't about ensuring that, hey, I'm okay in the media, my business is not affected, so on and so forth. While they recognized that that is important, the first thing that they put in place or in mind was the interest of the employees, the employee who got the COVID virus self banned, as well as his colleagues and people around him who potentially could be contracted. Thankfully, no one else got contracted with the virus, but that was also because of how Singtel reacted really quickly to show that they care, to ensure that everyone is safe, and hence things recovered really fast from operational point of view. And that's why I think this was an example I felt was really important to share, that if you care about employees, not only will that employee feel appreciated, but the rest of them, seeing how you treat every single one, even though he may not be a senior management, for instance, it sends a really, really strong message across. All right. Let me just move on to the next slide. Right. So next example is actually example by Jack Ma's Alibaba previously. So this story was actually told once again by Howard Schultz from Starbucks. So interestingly, what happened was Jack Ma, there was once, he invited Howard Schultz to Alibaba in China to do a talk. So what happened was Howard came and he was like in shock. Why was he in shock? He was asking Jack Ma like, "Hey Jack, am I in the right place?" So Jack was saying like, "Oh, what do you mean? Are you in the right place?" So he was seeing like a full theater of senior folks, right? And he was wondering, these people seem a little bit too old to be your employees, aren't they? What Jack Ma replied was, "You're right. No, these are not my employees, but these are actually the parents and the family of the relatives, or of the employees rather." So Howard Schultz was like a little bit baffled, like, why am I talking to them instead of the employees themselves? So Jack Ma shared this. He said, you know, in China, for instance, the employees value family a lot. One of the main reasons why they work so hard is to, send money back to the family, take care of the parents, and that filial piety, the family value system is really important. And to them, these are the influences and people who matters a lot to them. And hence, that's where an important lesson came to Howard Schultz, where he realized, hey, in different contexts instead, regardless of context itself, it doesn't matter. It's not just about caring about the employees themselves, but sometimes it's also important to understand what matters to them. Who do they care about, right? Who are the influences in their life? And by taking interest in them, that's where you learn a little bit more about who else, or what else in that sense can you do to create assurance, to create a care for them, that they feel, hey, my company truly cares about me and not just treat me like a number on the spreadsheet. That's the suckiest feeling that any employee can get. And don't expect any loyalty from there. Don't expect any beyond the extra mile kind of effort from there. Because only when people feel that they care, you care, then you start caring about what you say, what you have them to do, and what you care about basically. So these two examples really, I think, in a very simplest form, is about whether you take interest in your employees, do you care about their well-being, or do you, in crisis in particular, show that anything else is important but them. So that's something that I think a very human-centric, a very people-first mindset is especially important in times of crisis. Finally, D stands for decisiveness. So I think in times of crisis, we don't have the luxury to really sit down and think through things for a long time. We need to make our decisions fast, and with the limited information that we have, make the best informed situation in that sense, right? So I'd like to share an example here. Disney. You guys are probably familiar with Disney, Marvel, and stuff like that. The previous CEO, currently the executive chairman, Bob Iger. So this was a story they shared in Masterclass, which I was watching quite a fair bit recently to upgrade myself. So what he shared was this crisis that he faced a couple of years back, where one of his female executive, I think she tweeted something inappropriate, right? And he gathered a lot of negative response from the market itself during this period, and during which there was a huge uproar against Disney. So when he saw that, he was thinking, okay, the first thing that came to his mind, he has to fix it. And he was thinking, hey, I'll probably have to fire her, right? That's the quick decision they have to make, and being very decisive because of what she did. She has to take responsibility for that. In particular, she was quite a senior person in the company itself. But then he also slowed down a little bit to think of, hey, maybe I'll just consult some of my senior leaders rather than taking too long to think about this. And when he spoke with some senior leaders who were even the supervisors of this senior management itself, he realized that everyone was on the same page and felt that they have to make a decisive decision, a quick one, to really, stem the issue right from the root itself to kind of salvage the impression, the image of Disney. And this is one example that I feel is pretty important for us to think about in times of crisis. We may not have all situations, we may not be able to consult every single one, but best effort at times, right? Best effort based on the key considerations, the priorities, and make the best possible decision with all things possible in mind to make the decision to save the company. I think that's really important. And one more example that I have is you probably see in the market a lot of senior leaders made a very quick, decisive decision to take a salary cut, right? 20%, 30%, 3 months, so on and so forth. I think that's really important because in times of crisis, there's a lot of speculation, a lot of questions from the team, from your employees thinking, so what's going to happen, right? Am I going to keep my job? Am I just going for no paid? Am I going to be fired? What's going to happen? I think that's always the top of mind when crisis strike. And for management to do something quick, something meaningful, something to strong, something to send a strong message, right, to the employees. That's really important and very impactful. So the point is, right, regardless of the first example, Disney example, or this current example in terms of salary cut, what's important is that make the most informed decision fast. I think especially in times of crisis, that matters a lot because things change so quickly, the variables change, and if you lose that opportunity to make the right decision at the right point of time, that's where things can get worsened really, really quickly. So with that, actually, I pretty much concluded, the key pointers that I have. So how do we fight COVID with COVID, right? So back to the point, we want to build communities, both internally and externally. We want to be open about the situation, be vulnerable, but be real and authentic to our employees to create a trust and respect. We want to use tools, technology, communication, combining it, but be mindful of what are the threats and opportunities available for us to work on. We want to take interest. We want to care for our employees. And finally, in times of crisis, we don't have luxury of time. So make the informed decision and be really decisive about it and just, go ahead to make things happen. So with that, actually, I pretty much concluded what I have to share. I'd like to hand the time over to Brad, man. I'll be happy to take any questions that the audience might have. Yep. Brad, over to you.
Yes, I think there's some lagging on Brad. So probably, is there any questions from uh, the audience? Please chat on the Q&A slide. And
Yep. Feel free to throw your questions, whether it's self-leadership, team leadership. Ned and I will try our best to answer as much as possible.
yes, correct. So it's very interesting for sharing some fight COVID with COVID, right? So from that 5 points, actually, from your side, what is the most important thing?
To me, I think there must be a good balance amongst the 5 points. So I would think that different organizations will probably have to prioritize different things differently, right? So for example, if everyone is already losing their job and stuff like that, perhaps the openness and community part is quite important. How do we find an alternative around it? How do we build a support network for them might be very important. For instance, in times where everybody's still there, but perhaps there's a lot of fear involved, maybe the interest part where you show care about them, where you constantly check in with them, is probably more essential, or rather a heavier weightage in that sense. So I would say it depends on the situation and context of the company. But then, more importantly, is that all these have to be considered in a very balanced manner, in my opinion. Yeah.
So the implementation could be vary from one another. It depends on the situation. Yeah.
Yep, definitely. I think that's something that we need to think about, that there is no one size fits all, which is why I think when I was sharing the stories, it's really for us to understand what the core elements are, what is the key things that we can take away and build it into our own context. I think that's important. It's not just about copying the best practice, but instead, how can I look at certain practices, the key elements, and build it into my own company context, my own culture, to solve my unique problems? Because all of us face different problems, even though we may be in the same industry. So that's why I think it's really important for us to think from that perspective.
Yep.
Hey, it's Brett. If you guys have any questions, please jump in and add them in the Q&A channel. Nat, maybe Nat and Sam, I guess, but Nat, a question from your series. I mean, first, a point. One, we're definitely leaders of ourselves, and if we're not leading ourselves well, hard to be a good leader in any other way, right? I get that. But I think it's important when you're working from home, you kind of notice even more that you're a leader of yourself, your company, and your team, but also maybe your family and your spousal relationship, right? So there's a leadership in crisis role you have to play for you with your spouse, you with your family, you with your team. So I think it's a really taxing time for people as they think about leading themselves as well as leading their being a leader in all the roles they have to be a leader in. My question is, one of the challenges I've heard lots of people articulate when I tell them things like, "Hey, you should use this as a time for self-development." They like laugh and say, "Yeah, you're not at home with like 4 kids and a mother-in-law. I have less time for personal development now than when I was working." So I think a lot of people are struggling with hearing everyone talk about use all your free time to do this and that when they feel like they're under even more pressure and strain now than ever before.
Yes, Brett. So I do, and I also feel the challenge itself because I have 3 kids at home, and they are all studying at home, and I need also to assist them on their study as well. So, yeah, you can imagine how the life would be working in one time, assist the kids in one time, and preparing the house things at one time as well. Yeah, this is quite a challenging time. So, I mean, in terms of the self growth itself, there's a lot of things that we can learn. I mean, learn is not only necessary about reading, about learning new skills, but the idea is about you can also learn about your emotion. It's also part of the self growth because, like I shared before, this kind of situation is one in 100 year, if I may say. There's something like this pandemic crisis. So this kind of situation put us on a very hard situation, which we will never face before. So our emotion experience itself, it might be different, and it might be something that we can learn from it. So this also part of self growth from my point of view, that you are more aware of yourself, that you are more aware of how you feel and how you react on this kind of situation. Understand as well that from learning point of view, skill point of view, yes, tough is always tough. Not only on this kind of situation, even on the normal situation, I always say that I don't have time to learn. So basically, it's again depend on us, whether we would like to spare the time or not, to commit, to share, to prepare, to use the time or not. That's my point of view, Brett. Probably Sam have another point of view. Sam, please go ahead.
Yeah,
I, so
Sam's a brand new father. So what's it like for you? I mean, it's a blessing to have more time at home with the family, right? But maybe it's a challenge as well.
Yeah, so more time at home with family comes with different set of expectations, comes with less time for myself, less time and less energy essentially. So Ned can probably relate to that. I mean, I have one, you have three, you probably have more to handle on hand. So I think for me the key takeaway is then this, right? I think it's about finding a routine around it. So we spoke about briefly just now about what's a new normal, right? The new normal could be perpetually then we have to work from home, we have to manage the household stuff, the kids, and work at the same time. That could be the new norm itself. So instead of us perpetually thinking from a negative point of view that, hey, this is so tough, this cannot be done, and I hope that things go back to normal, you tend to think of it as, how do I then reflect and see, based on my current situation, how can I build a new routine, right? I think that's one thing that I like to think about. The other part is then, through such a crisis, it's a matter of like whether it's half full or half empty kind of situation in terms of glass, right? How do I see this crisis as an opportunity? Can I do things a little bit differently, for example? For example, instead of face-to-face meeting, can I do like a virtual call now that I can't travel, for instance? And it saves a lot of traveling time, in fact. How can I find certain pockets of opportunities and capitalize and reinvent myself from a skill set perspective and from a mindset perspective? I think this is something that I feel is really essential for all of us, whether we are leaders or not, to ensure that we can come out of this crisis a lot stronger rather than coming out and still being kind of trapped, in old self, and then finding it hard to move on with times in that sense. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, one of the things we were talking about before this webinar started, Sam, is that I think a lot of people think about this as something they have to get through, like the work from home scenario, and I think it's a really positive step to stop thinking that way and start thinking about hey, this is the new permanent. Maybe it's not permanent, but I think you're going to be much happier if you think, okay, this is my permanent situation. How do I optimize for this? How do I make working from home with my kids around and all the other pressures work the best it possible can? Everything from a great headset with a great microphone like you have, Sam, to a great webcam, to setting up my home office. I mean, I would start optimizing for this environment to make you as productive and the best possible in this scenario, versus saying, okay, let me somehow struggle through this for the next few weeks and hope it goes away. So I think it's time to start optimizing for it, and that's going to make you much happier and a much better leader.
Yeah, just to add to Brett's point as well, right? So that what Brett shared was from an individual point of view, and so far I think we are sharing from individual point of view how we shift our mindset and how do we get ready to optimize the situation. From a leadership, from a company's point of view as well, I think that's something one rethink as well, right? So moving forward with the current situation, is are the things that we give to our employees in terms of, let's say, benefits, in terms of the infrastructure, effective enough? Is it sufficient for them to operate in the current situation? I think there's something to think about as well, right? It's no longer just about giving the regular medical benefits or dental, whatever it is, but perhaps we need to set aside some budget moving forward for, let's say, technology tools, for example, a headset like Brett mentioned. For instance, these are things we want to think about in terms of getting ready for the new norm, for things ahead. But not only from an individual point of view, but also from organization side. How can we provide that support network to create that assurance that, hey, it's a new norm, but hey, we are in this together to make it happen? I think that's critical as well.
I think it's everything. It's like, how should my HR policies be optimized? How should my team meetings be optimized? How should I communicate with employees? It's not about getting through the next few weeks or months. It's about optimizing everything. So I would start rethinking everything with a very long-term frame, to be great at it, not to survive it, but to be great at it. Got a couple questions, Sam and Nat. One is around, how both are kind of related in terms of, how do you keep your kind of mental well-being in check and stay positive? Because there's so much negative news. There's a lot of pressures on individuals. Some are on unpaid leave. Some may have lost their jobs. A lot of hotels closing, airlines collapsing. How do you stay positive in this environment with all the pressures and negative news?
Nate, would you like to go ahead first?
Probably you can go ahead first, Sam, please.
Okay. So for me, like I shared just now, typically how my mindset works at least is, for every crisis, I like to think of the opportunities actually. Of course, everyone is badly hit, including myself. I mean, I have clients who cut their budget. I have clients who put on hold certain projects because, we can't do it for now, for instance. It's not the best time. I'm facing challenges as well, right? But I can choose two things. One, to be really depressed, just complaining every day, live an unshaven look, and just be upset about every single thing, complain about every single thing. Or I can keep my heads up. I can start thinking and reflect. What are some opportunities in the market that I haven't quite tapped on? what are some skill sets that I have that I can build on or have to build in that sense to make things happen. Like I said, now it's a situation where things are slowing down in most industries. It's a good time for us to really take stock of our skill sets, our competencies, our network, our relationships even. How can we capitalize on what we have and even look at what we don't have to build on it to identify the right opportunities to happen. Opportunities, to be honest, is everywhere. Very often everyone has the best idea in the world, but only perhaps 1%, 2% takes action to make it happen. So this is actually a good time, in my opinion, to think of, hey, what can I do next, right? Or what's a new norm for me using what I have now, and how do I really get started with it, rather than just complaining, waiting for things to happen, and praying for the situation to get better. But will that happen? Will that get better? We don't know. But can you be the one to make the change, to upgrade yourself, to shift your mindset and look for opportunities? Of course you can. So that's how I probably balance out the good and bad. And of course, I think if you feel that certain things are bringing the negative energy to you, for example, the news, social media, right? Shut it off, man. Shut it off. It's all easily removed in that sense. It's good to get information, but if too much information in a repeated manner is creating negative energy, shut it off. That's my advice to you.
Yeah.
Great, Nat. Anything to add? We're kind of out of time, so Nat, you have some closing words, and I'll take some closing words from Sam.
Yeah, so basically, in this kind of situation, people reaction usually on the first hit will be a denial. They denial that they are on this situation right now, and then after that, they come to the states of acceptance and move forward, take an action after that. So, agree with Sam that how to keep balance on the just focus on the positive news. Just focus on the positive side of everything. Try to limit it that you are become infected with the negative energy. One way that I try to do this, if I just have a thought in my mind, a negative thought, have doubt, I talk to my friends. I share my thought with my friends, and especially friends that who can support me to build my energy. So I think that's how, like Sam share, community can help us to face this issue. So talk to your friend, discuss, and then you can find the positive energy from them as well. This is what friends are for and the community for. So basically, as a leader, will be tough for us, but I think we can get through it. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to keep the balance of the positive mindset, and then after that, we can move forward with the team and be an example for them. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Nat. Any closing words for you, Sam?
I think for me, very quick one is that, we have to really shift our mindset in these times. We can, like I said, think of the negative, but if we always think about that, nothing's going to happen, or the worst things will happen, basically. So how do we shift our mindset to think of a crisis as an opportunity? How do we use this downtime or sword to sharpen our sword to make sure that we come a lot stronger? That's what I hope everyone can think about. And with that, I think using COVID to tackle COVID, that's the way to go, everyone.
All right, great. Nat and Sam, thank you so much. Fantastic insights. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing with our community.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
That concludes the formal part of the webinar. We hope to see all of you for next week's webinar on the GM's playbook. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Brett. Thank
Bye.
you all. Bye.